you were given the powers of God, what would you do with them? Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read it dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. The sequel to this story is coming out soon, so if you enjoy this, I'll put the link to this story and the sequel down below. Today, we're going to be talking about Divinity, a story that takes place within the Valiant universe, and like I said, is getting a sequel. Our tale begins on the doorstep of an orphanage, where Abram Adams was placed to be picked up in the winter of 1945. And that night, a man in a suit stood in the snow watching them take in the child. Abram was adopted until his adoptive parents died and he was taken in by the state. They gave him the best that they could because they intended to groom him for something greater. They saw him as a chance to prove the Soviet Union's superiority, and Abram loved the sciences, he enjoyed dreaming, and he hungered for discovery. He was elected for an important science expedition. The Soviets wanted to win the Cold War by beating the states to the edge of the galaxy. And due to the fact that Abram had no family, no ties, and nothing to hold him back, he was selected to be their pilot. Using some brand new cryogenic chamber technology, they would send him on a 30-year mission. Abram accepted this great honor and began his training. He wasn't nervous, he felt like he was turning the next page in a book, the next chapter in his life. But there was a problem. Abram had actually fallen in love. He just didn't tell his superiors that. He knew it was against the rules and that he shouldn't do it, but he also knew that he'd be gone for 30 years, so he just couldn't help himself. Eventually, he did need to break the news of his mission to Ava, that he wouldn't be returning, and he questioned his own motives. But he decided to go through with this. It was his desire to feel something. He wanted to experience everything. The launch went off without a hitch, and it was done in secret. They would only acknowledge the mission if he succeeded or if the Americans tried to beat them. In the year of 2015, a man named David injured himself while climbing, and he wandered into what appeared to be an oasis in the middle of the Australian desert. It is there that he found a man in a spacesuit, a man named Abram Adams. He was floating above the ground and a space pod lay behind him. The pupils in his eyes were gone. His eyes were pure white. While David approached Abram, soldiers stood a mile away with Abram in their sights. They weren't sure who he was or what his intentions were, but there seemed to be a religion forming around him. Abram turned and he looked at the snipers, 1 mile away. Then things began to change. One man turned into a giant bird, another turned into a series of butterflies, and the last man, he saw his wife and child. Abram had a regret, one thing that he didn't want to leave behind before going on his mission. Ava told him that she was pregnant, and it haunts Abram to this day, as his future self sits off to the side on the day that Ava gave his younger self the news. Tears began to form in his eyes, as she was telling him on the day that he would be leaving for 30 years. Back in 2015, the soldier reports their deepest desires have been granted, and all of this is happening on a floating ball of green in the middle of the desert. Abram is actively making things better, reuniting families, turning angry, lonely personalities into things of beauty, making everyone and everything happy. But this scares a good portion of the world. They're scared of what he's capable of. Yet some people, they were in awe. And one of the scientists on the original project approached the thing that the government began calling Divinity. The scientist was hoping to one day understand what happened, but he does know what Abram's doing. He knows what's happening. He's not granting wishes. He's reaching deep down into people to find out what they need. As the scientist approaches Abram simply tells him, "Tell them." He then makes the scientist young again, and he walks out into the desert to Ginger, the Unity Project's mobile base. The scientist walks in and he informs our heroes, Galad the Eternal Warrior, Livewire, Exo Man of War, and Ninjak, that Abram means no harm. He's just making things better. He has the power to end war and shape lives into perfection. But the man in charge of Unity still wants something, so they're gonna send the team in to either contain or terminate Divinity. No questions asked. But just because they are heroes does not mean that they are immune to their own desires. As our heroes grow closer, Ninjak sees his mother, Exo Man of War sees his father, and Galad is finally shown rest, the one thing he desires, to die. 27 years after Abram started his mission, he had reached what appeared to be the edge of the universe. But it is now that we see that he didn't go alone. There were 3 individuals, and when they reached the unknown, they each got out of their travel pods. But it was Abram who, in this area of unknown, took his helmet off. He reflects on this moment often, because he wonders if this is the moment that Abram died and Divinity was born. Because he swears he died at this moment. Back in the current day, Divinity allowed Unity to approach him, even bringing back Galad, and they asked him to come with them. But he told them that he knows that they aren't here to help him. They have no idea who or what he is, and they are to contain him. And and he welcomes them to try. They charge in at him as a team, but in that second, that very second that they attacked, it turned into years, and Divinity was separated and lost in those years. Ninjak in that time learned how to read through these moments and slowly but surely showed his teams how to meditate and bring themselves back into reality, because this wasn't real. They were still in the motion of attacking Divinity. No matter how long it felt like they were gone, it was still that very second that they attacked. All the way back in 1987, when Abram became Divinity, he told his comrades that he was going home. His comrades told him that they needed to push forward, but Abram walked back to his ship, tirelessly trying to fix it and make it whole again. But eventually he learned that he didn't need tools any longer. He could make things just happen. It was the end of his mission as far as he was concerned, and he decided that he had had enough. He didn't leave his comrades there. They left him as they pushed deeper into the edge of the universe. He came rocketing back to Earth, but by that time it was 2015, and entire generations had come and gone. He created a floating grassy area in Australia, and then using his powers, he brought Ava to himself, young and perfect, just like he remembered her. He then embraced her, and then he saw his daughter next to her. Ava asked Abram where she was and how she was here and why they're here, and Abram could only get out the words that he missed her. He would do anything to undo what he did. Back in the present day, Ninjak's plan worked, and Unity was beginning to snap out of Divinity's tricks. Exo Man of War knew that he was in their heads, and they had to push him out. So Divinity had a new idea. He had followers, believers with him, and those believers were not ready to let Unity take him. He was their god. But their god, Divinity, was lost in his own memories. Time didn't mean anything to him at this point. He was lost in the moment when Abram first came back to Earth before his followers and his believers. And he was with his wife and his daughter again. And Ava told him it was too late. Abram didn't understand. Why was it too late? He could put everything back the way it should be. And in the present day, as Galad and Ninjak tried to hold back the followers, Exo Man of War blasted Divinity and Livewire got the containment in place, sealing Abram up. While he was locked inside, he was still dealing with his own memories. He was locked in his own past. Ava told Abram that she and his daughter moved on with their lives. They had full and happy lives, and the both of them died. She begged Abram to let them go. Don't bring them back in this manner. They faded away, and Abram couldn't help but look out of the containment pod that he was in, because he had come back home for his wife and child. He wanted to bring happiness, and instead, he ended up with this. Ginger performed the extraction, which pulled Unity and the containment pod out at the same time, preventing any further civilian harm. And as Divinity pulled away, the floating orb green crashed into the middle of the Australian desert, and the followers of Divinity had a new purpose. For the divine. David, the man who saw it first, he became the prophet, and he wrote the gospel of Divinity. They will free Divinity from the government. None of the members of Unity felt good about what they had done. They all had differing opinions, like why they even did this. He wasn't doing anything wrong, and he actually seemed to be helping people. The containment pod was placed far beneath the earth, where Abram got to be happy again. He brought his daughter back, and he spent his days with her. He spent his days sitting in his cell, flipping through the life of Abram Adams, reliving this story over and over, savoring the best parts. This is one of those stories that you start reading not knowing what to expect, and as you go through it, you're just engrossed with how amazing it is. I tried my best to tell you the story, but it jumps around with all different kinds of time periods that you may have to read this one yourself. I'm leaving you the link to Divinity Part 1 down below, and Part 2 should be starting this month. When it ends, I'll make you guys a video, but if you want to read it now, go ahead and click the link down below. I'll see you guys next time, and if you want to chat right now, follow me on Twitter at Comicstorian and Instagram at Comicstorian.